Thanks for being here.
You're very welcome.
It is Owen, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's spelled a bit differently.
Yes. It was specifically designed to stay in Ireland, I think. It's spelled EOGHAN.
Right.
Oh.
But now you're half in SF.
Yes.
Okay. We'll get to more of that later. Do you want to introduce yourself as anything different than the co-founder and CEO of Intercom?
No, that does just fine. Yeah, I'm a co-founder. I've 3 other great founders.
Okay.
We started 4.5 years ago, and I'm the CEO today.
Awesome.
Yep.
So let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about how Owen McCabe became Owen McCabe. How did you sort of get first interested in computer science and in entrepreneurship? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? Did you have any initial entrepreneurial sort of like any tinges of? Did you have a lemonade stand over in Ireland or?
No. Okay, so the wonderful thing about being a human is that I think life is a journey of trying to figure out who the hell we are, and to that end, where the hell we came from and what made us who we are. And so I can't possibly tell you the formula that made Owen McCabe, but I can tell you a couple stories that I think are a little part of my story, and they're only interesting to me, but hopefully 1 or 2 of them might be interesting to somebody else too. So I guess one of the stories I tell was just my own fascination with a couple TV shows that were around at the time. And I've told this story to folks in the US, and it draws complete blanks, but I don't have any other good stories, so I'm going to continue to tell it. So I grew up in Dublin, Ireland. I moved here in 2011. And one of the shows I used to watch when I was small was called Beyond 2000, Blank Stares. And then another was called Tomorrow's World, Blank Stares. And one of them was an Australian show, another was like a UK show. But they both were about the fabulous future that they thought or hoped we might live in, or at least that they thought it would make an interesting TV show. And it was back when people thought the future looked like flying cars, or you would get all your nutrition from some little pill that would create a taste of pizza or whatever they thought comprised Soylent. So one of them came true. We don't have to talk about the fact that I also am trying Soylent at the moment, and I don't recommend it. But it was back when the future was like very bright and fucking exciting and like futuristic, right? And the future, I don't think we think is as futuristic anymore for whatever reason, but that's another conversation. But watching those things, it just filled me with absolute wonder. Like, I guess I was always a little bit of an imaginative kid, and I used to invent stories and games with my like sisters and my friends on the street, but it just really filled me with wonder, and it got me excited just about technology in general. And I think that those experiences are one of the reasons that I got excited for technology for the sake of technology, which people in the Valley don't like to admit. Here, it's really, really important that you have a mission and a vision, and we have those things. It's very important that you want to change the world, and we want to change the world. But it's not cool to admit that you think technology is really fucking cool and exciting, and you want to build things that are just interesting from a geeky perspective. And I got really into technology and science and the idea of a better future just because I thought it was fucking cool. And it's disappointing when people are reticent to recognize just how cool technology can be. It's okay for it to be cool for the sake of cool.
Sweet. Okay, so you're taking that love of technology that's just awesome. You're studying computer science at Trinity College, and at college do you meet Des, one of your original co-founders, at college, or shortly thereafter?
I do not. This is not how people usually speak. It's pretty interesting.
Okay, so when did you meet Des?
Okay, so we make a technology that makes it easier to communicate with your customers, and it's more natural than this. Right. Thank you. A little chance for a plug. So I did not meet Des at college, but that was a good guess because it's as good as any guess. I went to college to study computer science. A lot of my friends and peers did not know that they necessarily wanted to study computer science, but people were making a shit ton of money at the time that we all started. And pretty much at the time that we all started, the dot-com bubble burst, and people really regretted studying computer science. And it kind of like separated those of us who thought they were going to make a bunch of money and they left and went elsewhere, and then those who were excited about technology and they stayed there. Through computer science, which I thought was a pretty amazing experience, I went to Trinity in Dublin, and Trinity College has one of the oldest computer science schools in the world. It was one of the first, and so unlike a lot of wonderful courses that are out there, instead of learning practical skills that you might bring to the world and find a career with, they taught us about math. So it was like a little trick for people who thought that computers weren't going to be interested. You'll learn on your first day when you're already completely committed that it's just a math course. But it was actually a bunch of fun. All through college, I was consulting, making shitty websites for people I can now describe as having shitty startups. But I tried my best. And it was kind of the start of my career in escaping having a boss. And the kind of like cute and funny little story I tell about the idea of getting into consulting to not have a boss is that, and there's a ton of folks who have started software companies for this, with this exact story. You get into consulting to not have a boss. Selling hours of your time is the only way that you can make money so quickly. And the cruel joke is you end up with not one boss, but 10 bosses, 10 clients. I met Des after college. I started a consulting company called Contrast, and it was designed specifically to be different. That was so natural. He was just like, don't look at me. Keep
Nothing to see here.
Don't make them look at me. Okay, that was natural. So yes, I started this consulting company called Contrast. It was so named to be different. I still very much had some sort of chip in my shoulder, wanted to prove that we were smarter and better than everyone else. I still have some degree of that, but it's been knocked off year after year that I get older. But that was when I met Des, and Des was also another angry person in the industry, writing a bunch of blog posts about how everyone was wrong. That was kind of how I made my name. And sometimes opposites attract, but sometimes people who both think that the world could be better are attracted to each other. And we started to spend time together, and he joined Contrast about that time, 2008.
Okay, so you're doing Contrast, you're consulting, you met Des, and at Contrast, you worked on a couple of products that had raised, I think, tens of millions of dollars. I think one got acquired. Right. And so you're just out of college. Your knowledge is helping these companies get acquired, raise tens of millions of dollars. How did seeing those projects sort of succeed wildly, how did that affect your motivation to then go on and start your own venture, which was Exceptional? And I think that Exceptional was solving a problem that you had at Contrast, or at least that your clients had. I mean, did seeing those projects sort of skyrocket, did that sort of motivate you to start Exceptional, or was it something else that sort of motivated you from go to consultant to founder?
Something else.
Okay.
I always say to folks, because there's now lots of young, angry kids with chips on their shoulder also getting into consulting, that I say one of two things. One, you're going to hate it, and they hate it. It takes a very specific skill set to be good at consulting. It's hard. But two, that you're going to learn a lot. And it's one of the few kind of professions or endeavors or careers where you get to be exposed to so many different types of ways of working and different cultures and different markets, yet are liable for none of the risk, none of the downside. And so it really is a wonderful learning opportunity. And so we did see startups that raised tens of millions of dollars, but we very much learned from that. And the motivation never came from the idea that we too could raise tens of millions of dollars, or that we too could be acquired. That was never, ever, ever, ever the motivation. In fact, what had us build a bunch of a bunch of different apps and products was the same thing that got us into consulting in the first place, which was some degree of independence. We wanted to be masters of our own destiny. We did not want to be beholden to a bunch of clients. It's a whole bunch of very personal, emo, angry little things. Again, you'll find those motivations in all sorts of company founders, but they just don't admit it perhaps as readily, and maybe they're right to not do so. But yeah, we just wanted to get out of that consulting business, but we continued to be passionate about our craft. And one of the things that we maintained through our through running Contrast was a passion for technology, and we liked to truly invent and innovate. And the damn company was, like I said, called Contrast because we wanted to do things different. We abhorred the idea of Me Too endeavors, people who would copy others. I thought and continue to think that like the technology industry and just an opportunity to build software or any type of technology is just a cool opportunity to contribute to the fucking progress of the human race.
Yeah.
Like it's exciting. And so we were excited about technology, excited to solve problems, excited to like seek some degree of independence. So we worked on a bunch of different products.
Cool.
And
so in terms of helping the human race move forward, is that where Quitter came in?
No.
Tell me where that.
Dynamic where you
Tell me
it's the opposite of
right.
the truth.
Exactly.
If we can keep that going, that'll be cool. There was a bunch of different things that we built. Some were substantially more important than others, and some were a total drain on our attention and our time, and probably increased unhappiness in the whole world. And Quitter was one of those things. So what happened was I came here like for a brief period of time in 2007, and I'll leave out all sorts of parts of this story, but Twitter was just taking off. The main person who was mailing users of Twitter to announce new features or whatever was one of the founders, Biz Stone. I just replied to one of the damn emails and said, hey, I'm here with a bunch of Irish folks. We'd love to buy you a Guinness. He said yes. Hours later, we're hanging out with like all the early team at Twitter. And that was like a crazy little Silicon Valley experience, which like was a little hint of magical things to come, at least for me. People's generosity and openness here is you don't find that anywhere else. But I remember specifically coming out of that, it was like Gordon Biersch of all places, which is now closed down at the water, coming out of there a little tipsy, saying, "This Twitter thing's gonna be big," you know. They're onto something, and I said like, let's build a Twitter app. Let's build something for Twitter. And the main kind of experience, there was two main ways in which you use Twitter. One was go to twitter.com, and another was the email you got to say that someone followed you. And like back in those early days, like the kind of like general like group of people who used Twitter was small enough such that it was rare, and they were usually industry insiders and early adopters and people you knew. And that was kind of a core part of the experience. You get this email. And so I realized, hey, like, yes, it's exciting to get an email when someone follows you. Wouldn't it be something, I don't know if exciting was the word, to get an email when someone unfollows you? And it was kind of like, you know, I watched this amazing TED Talk before about genius, and the idea of like genius is, you know, that this particular person puts forward is that it's something that comes over you as opposed to something that you are. And so I'm happy to say that was a moment of genius where I was like, shit, everyone's going to use this. So we made Quitter. We spent all of like 4 hours on it, launched it on a Wednesday. It fell over and crashed on a Thursday, got it back online that afternoon, and on Friday there was a Wall Street Journal piece called OMG, OMG, we're not BFFs anymore. And it was about the meaning of relationships in the social age. And this, for like a bunch of bumpkin Irish kids in Dublin, was like, holy fuck, like what's happening? So that was an interesting experience, but created negative value in the world. For every one piece that explored the idea of relationships in the social age, there was 10 saying Quitter is bad and it must die. And there was like that came out pretty much the same day as the Wall Street Journal piece. There was a TechCrunch piece with exactly that title, and it was like from a bunch of reputable people, and it hurt. Jennifer from Intercom smiling, she just joined and only just realized that we actually worked on Quitter. So that was like a weird thing that I don't usually talk too much about. But that was not one of the ways in which you contributed to technology.
Okay, so let's go into how you did contribute. You're working at Exceptional. You developed some tools for developers. I think it was bug tracking, error tracking. and you develop a need, or you have some issues communicating with your customers. You find that there's not a good tool out there, or the tools are too segmented. There's too many of them. Like, what was, I mean, in your own words, what was the need that you were trying to fill? Because you tested the original idea of Intercom with Exceptional in a way. And so what was the moment when you're like, wow, this is broken. We gotta try to fix this in some way.
Right. You're supposed to make a guess. That's wrong, and that's
I'm off the theme.
It's fine. So, the story I tell around that is, I guess
you can tell a different one if
no, I think it's a good one actually. Okay. It's for me, it's kind of like a little. It's one of those like little examples that if you're kind of an idea person or a synthesizer, like I think people, I think people who like are like creative or intellectually, I think who have an active brain, they'll fall along one end of a scale where it's either analytical, so you can look at ideas and break them apart and break them down and like turn it around and kind of understand what it's comprised of, or they are synthesizers who can like look at a bunch of ideas and put them together. And I think people who create things and creative people are often synthesizers. And so for people who feel like they've got like that synthesizing strength, if that's a phrase that we can use, this little thing I'll share like will definitely resonate with them. So we made this thing for Exceptional, and Exceptional, by the way, was the first of what was to become a fantastically uninteresting product category called error tracking. Absolutely the first. You install in your app. When a bug occurred, it would notify the developer. Super boring, but it was successful to some degree. We made this thing that we call just simply notifications. We, as Contrast, like I said, like to do a bunch of things differently, and we thought we were inventors and innovators and whatnot, and I think that we are. But one of the things in which we did differently was that we had like we had an interface that didn't look like a traditional web application. Web applications at the time were like websites that just did a bunch of work, and so that they had headers and logos in the top left and whatnot, and we were like, forget that. This is a real piece of software. We're going to make a real interface. It's not going to have a header and a logo and all these very conventional things. And actually, that's where web applications went. But we had like a little stamp with the logo, which was a star in the bottom right-hand corner of the page, the interface. And this notifications thing we built, you could log into the back end of Exceptional, paste in a little message or some HTML, and hit save. And this little star would like pop up with a little bubble in the bottom right. And it was kind of amazing because non-technical people or anyone in the company, or even technical people who didn't want to develop a new thing every time they wanted to communicate with their customers, could go in and speak directly to folks, and with a message that bypassed shitty email and spoke to people directly in the context of this application. It was amazing. So we like published blog posts or like shared feature announcements or spoke about downtime, etc. This little bubble in Exceptional. Anyway, there was one little story, which is not a fantastically interesting story, but again, for people who I think are synthesizers and creative people, was, I was speaking to one of my co-founders and I said, this notifications thing is cool. It could actually be a product. And we went, ha, 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 ha. And when the silence died, we were like, and like that little magical moment, like honestly, for people who do value themselves as like creatives or who do think that they can come up with valuable ideas, like that little moment, this thing in there, that pattern matching, or that, probably release some sort of endorphins or something. There's an interesting study to be done. That's the magic of, like, for me as a kid who watched the shows that you've never heard of before, who like wanted to be an inventor, you live for those little moments where you're like, fuck.
Spark. Yeah.
The spark. The eureka moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's ways to make people really unhappy when their ex-boyfriends unfollow them on Twitter.
Right.
But sometimes it's a whole new product that might be successful.
Okay. And so you go from that aha moment to, were you the CEO of Exceptional? Or?
Yes. So I was the CEO of like Contrast and then Exceptional. Yeah.
So, and Exceptional had been running for a couple years.
4 years.
Before you had this idea.
Yeah.
So I think for founders that maybe are thinking of pivoting, or for founders that are maybe working on multiple ideas, how did you take that aha moment and then translated into selling to Rackspace, moving full time into Intercom, which you posted on Twitter in 2012. You said we're done with Exceptional, we're moving on to Intercom. How did you know that that was the right decision?
If you were to, so I understand why the question is asked that way, because if we were to write a timeline of own story, we'd draw one linear straight line.
Right.
That's how we understand time, and then we'd put little lines on it, clear moments.
We're human, you know.
And it's no, totally, absolutely, and this is the way we think about it. And at one point, it would say, launches Intercom,
right,
or starts Intercom. It's one finite thing.
So what happened between the aha moment and the start?
So really, honestly, the story it's just the same story for anyone that works on any project or any real thing. It's just progressive commitment. It's it's success by 1,000 cuts almost, or it's focus by 1,000 teeny tiny commitments. It starts with one thing where you're wouldn't this be interesting to work on, and you tease it out a little more, and then you scribble on the back of an envelope, and then you email someone and they email you back, and then you meet on a Saturday and you meet on another Saturday and you write some code and you design a thing and you redesign a thing and you show it to someone else, and this goes on and on and on and on and on for literally thousands of days, and then you end up talking to someone at Startup Grind. So there's no moment that it sounds I would, of course I want to tell this heroic moment where we're
right,
we're gonna do this, and everyone's yeah, high five. That doesn't happen. It's just not the way it works, and everyone knows it's not the way it works. However, there's another way to look at this, which is I think what was underneath the question, which is how do you know this is what you're gonna focus on? And for me, I know at least the way my brain works is that there's fucking finite space there, such that stuff just leaking out all the time I'm gonna forget about, unanswered emails from Aaron and just stuff I'm never gonna get to and forget about, and I'll die haven't forgot about. I'll be on my deathbed and be shit. But if you respect that's how your brain works, that it's limited, you're super limited, please don't spread that headspace thin. And so I always I feel early on was committed to one thing, pick a fucking thing, pick a lane, pick a fight, pick something, pick a thing. By all means, quit when it doesn't work, but don't try and hedge. Great people don't hedge. Great artists don't hedge. Humans don't hedge. People who try to be multiple things, that's always a disaster.
Yeah.
You could do 5 things terribly shit. You do 2 things spread in half. Pick a thing. By all means, quit it early. Quit it a day after. That's okay too. But pick a thing. So there's no aha moment. We're gonna focus on this. But if I promise that if you focus one thing at a time and absorb it and work through it and feel it and hate it, then you'll kind of you'll get through it way faster. Put another way, I bet it takes at least 5 times longer to figure out whether an idea is going to work or not if you do 5 ideas, right?
Right.
I think.
Okay. Start to work on Intercom full time. Now, had you sold Exceptional at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. And so did the funds from Exceptional help you to start bootstrapping Intercom?
Yeah. So we kind of to the degree that we've always done one thing at a time. We had given up on Exceptional long before it was kind of off our hands.
Right.
So we were kind of working on the Intercom idea in the background, tossing around in our heads and whatnot. But it wasn't until we had actually sold it that we, I guess, could go completely full in on it. And yes, we used the funds from the last thing to pretty much fund the first year of Intercom.
The first year, okay. And so you then, I think in 2011, 2012, went out to raise a seed for Intercom.
Right. So I went out at the end of 2011, the first year of Intercom, before we actually closed around at the very end of 2011, was kind of that first year that we funded it. Raised that round at the end of 2011 and announced it early 2012.
Okay. And so for for people thinking about when is the best time to go out to look for that round, I think, you know, you'd spend a year working on Intercom or building Intercom. Did you have a full product? Did you have traction? Did you have customers at the point of going to get that first seed round? And if you didn't, or if you did, what would you recommend to founders to always try to get under their belts before going to look for that seed to sort of have the most favorable terms?
Yep. So the first thing I'll say before I even get into that is that there are infinite ways to skin this technology cat. Like, there's just no correct way. There's no right or wrong. Every new company invents their own path to success. That's what's so exciting about technology. It's like an industry of like new things and opportunities, always new opportunities just presenting themselves and exposing themselves, whether it's like the Messenger platform that fucking launched yesterday. I mean, like, brand new opportunities. One day, new opportunities. So there's like constantly new opportunities. Sorry, what was the question?
So when you went to raise, had Intercom already
Yes.
acquired customers?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got a little excited. So yes, it had. We had customers. We had a product. We really had something to point at. We had value that we were delivering. And that really benefited us. And for sure, it took us a good 4 or 5 months. It took me a good 4 or 5 months to like even raise 500K, even after we had like hundreds, if not thousands of people using the product. It was like live and clearly a thing, and people loved it and were tweeting about it and all that kind of good stuff. And so that was very important to us. Like I said, there's nothing impossible, and it would have been wholly possible for me to raise 500K, if not 5 million, without building a product, but it might have taken 5 years to do it. And so, like, it all depends on, I guess, the position from where you're coming. Like, if you're the type of person who has gone and raised a bunch of money and deployed it in clearly valuable ways and built a team, and it's been validated, and such that you've got incredible amount of revenue and revenue growth, and you've gone public, like all these degrees of validation and success are going to make it easier for you to raise money again, right?
Yeah.
But if you're starting from the start, it's frankly going to be straight up tough to like raise money before you've built something. Yeah. And now more than ever before, at least if you're in software, but honestly, even if you're in like building for consumers, just the markets are so damn big. Myself and Des, when we talk about, our exceptional days, it barely kind of like covered our costs back then when it was running. Yet we're pretty certain that if we like, ran it today, it would be like extraordinarily profitable and we'd never have to raise for it. And there's companies doing in the air tracking product category who are raising like Series A rounds right now. Just the market for software and technology in general is just so much bigger. And we get to see it with Intercom because we sell to a range of different small internet businesses. Only half of our customers are in the United States. The rest of them are all over Europe, India and China, and Eastern Europe, and then a bunch of cities that don't like show up when people talk about tech. Like Paris is like really, really big for early stage tech. Like even when we did Exceptional, which is still only, we sold it like 5 years ago. All those markets didn't exist. All those cities, like from Dublin to Paris to, all over in India and China, like those markets for like technologies, even if they're consumer markets, never mind, B2B markets, they just didn't even exist. And so now more than ever before, the kind of bar is higher. If you come to an investor to say, hey, we've built something of value, it's substantially less excusable that you don't have revenue if not that you're not profitable. And it's not that I think that it's magical to be profitable or anything like that, but it's just easier than ever before. The market is bigger, and so the truth is, if you haven't started a company before and been successful or raised a bunch of money, it's going to be damn hard without customers and a product.
Yeah, and so in terms of thinking about raising, and you said you went out and raised that 500K. I think that, are there people in the audience that are looking to raise around? Okay, so your seed round had about, I think, 17 different investors. I think there were a couple of funds or institutional investors, but majority were from individuals.
Yep.
I think there were some Irish founders and some other founders in that. I think Biz from the Quitter interaction came on board. So for the founders, I mean, how was it? What was that process like? Were you slogging through each individual? Was it, you know, did someone come in unexpectedly? I think you have a Tokyo-based firm, Digital Garage, in there that's interesting. You know, what was just that? And then I think all subsequent rounds were very led by institutional, Bessemer, Social Capital, Iconic. But that first round seems to be really unique for you as a company, and I think it'd be interesting to sort of hear about how that sort of got filled.
Yep. So, you know, I was substantially more of a nobody than I am today. I was like,
well, now you're the it guy. You know, you're startup
right
guy.
now.
Yeah.
So that'll help my next seed round. But back then, had never raised money, had no connections here whatsoever. We had a product, but it was a pretty fucking weird product. Like, what's it trying to be? You're trying to be everything. Who's your competitors? It's like, I'm sorry, son, you're an idiot.
Yeah,
like it was like a bad idea.
Your slide deck, which you recently tweeted out, I think has about like 5 columns of competitors in
like
it.
Literally like just a collection
and it's like
of
Zendesk,
startups.
Mail, Salesforce.
Absolutely.
Like
and you know, the truth is that if you are going to define a product category, and all breakout successes, all big technology companies are big because they defined their own category and therefore owned that position and created that opportunity. If you are going to define your category, by definition, nothing like it exists before. So it's going to be very hard. Put another way, if you're a nobody, like I was, and you can raise real easy for your idea, it's a little bit too fucking obvious.
you know you got something.
You know you got something bad. If it's too easy, it's too obvious. Like, it's very obvious to build like, oh, let's just build like a faster help desk or a mobile help desk, or this help desk is going to work on Facebook, or, you know, like the Me Too things are so obvious. They're like too easy to bet on, and they're way easier to raise seed rounds for. The breakout companies, if you're going to define a product category, they're going to be phenomenally difficult to explain. So you kind of like choose your battles. If you'd like to build a Me Too thing, if you'd like to jump in beside a whole bunch of other competitors and like, you know, battle for scraps and happily sit alongside them and have a substantially reduced opportunity, go for it. Your life will be easier. If you would like to build a truly transformative, once in a generation, very, 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 very large and impactful technology company, your life's going to be really, really difficult when you're raising. And certainly that's the excuse that I'm going to give you today. It was super hard. And, you know, I met all sorts of institutions. It didn't make sense. I also didn't know how the game works. And any industry, like, has a game or has, you know, certain etiquette. You know, I found it as hard to enter the Valley as apparently Kanye found it as hard to enter fashion, right?
Yeah.
Like, how does this work? Like, you know, they won't let me win. Like, it's like, you know, there's etiquette in all these things. I couldn't start to tell you how, like, professional ballet works or coffee or startup events, right? There's certain ways that people work. There's certain costs involved, and there's certain relationships that you're going to have to work with, etc. So part of the challenge was, like, simply learning how it worked. So, you know, simply being here, anyone who's already here is, like, ahead of the rest of the world almost. Like, technology is still so teeny tiny, and as much as it has become kind of like globally democratized, where you do see, you know, Paris, for example, becoming really big and relevant in tech, you know, it's still so small such that this is still, you know, the epicenter. So people who are already here, all these people who are here today, are like kind of ahead of the pack in that respect, but like learning how it all works is the first step, and I had to learn how it worked. And then just like understanding how investors think, and I didn't understand that either. So for sure, the reason we have, I don't know if it's 17, something of that order, the reason we have this like long list collection of like random investors is because no one would invest in us. And so I really did have to scrape together that cash. The funny story goes that you were kind of hinting at was that like I kind of, you know, if there was an aha moment, it was kind of when there was you know 4 co-founders, all from Dublin. You know, on one fateful day, I said, I'm going to America, lads. And I'm going to go out and like raise a seed round. And like, you know, I like waved a hanky on the ferry.
Never to see you again.
Like, Des, like, and I said, like, I'm going to raise $1 million, and, like, came back cap in hand with, like, $500,000 from, like, a real random selection of folks that no one had ever heard of before. Thank you, seed investors. We've made your money back many hundred times over. But we got back, and I was ready to, like, kind of apologize to my co-founders that, you know, all my confidence didn't actually equate to much, and got an email, like, that day from basically investors I'd never heard of before, and they said, hey, we heard we heard you're raising this round. Do you have time for a call? Does now suit? I was like, yes, sure. Kind of got on the call. I'm certainly like skipping a couple steps, but they basically said, would you like 500K? And I was like, yeah. And got off the call, and by the time I got to talk to the rest of the founders, I was like, I did it.
From the plane, you know, to the, okay. Yeah, that's amazing.
That's what an emotional roller coaster looks like.
Now, you had considerable more success raising rounds after that. You had, I think, you had an A round that had 500 startups, and I think you had social capital in there as well from Mamoon. And then you had Bessemer Ventures and a B, and then Iconic came out on the C, which you first raised in August of last year when you had about 78,000 customers. And then last week, you announced on the blog that you had raised a sort of a follow-on Series C at $50 million, that you would now be fully funded, 116 million total, hitting over 500 million end users with 10,000 paying customers.
That was super impressive. I don't even see that in his notes, but go on.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. So now that's from that initial product on Exceptional. You now have, I think, 4 sort of modules within the product. Where is, well, let's just sort of talk about Intercom. I mean, you set out to make it just easier to communicate with customers, and then that morphed into marketing and into some sales and leads. And so just talk a little bit about where Intercom's at, you know, sort of right now, what the journey of it, getting to where you're at, and maybe a little bit about that last round of funding and sort of what the future looks like with that round of funding.
Okay, there's a lot there.
You got this.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. So where are we at today? You know, you pretty much summarized it pretty well. Over 10,000 paying customers, 250 people in the company, growing pretty damn quickly. We were at 88 people at the start of last year, 250 today. We'll be about 500 in about a year. So it's very much in a growth phase. Let me jump around kind of like a little short history of like what we've been doing and what we are now and what comes next, and then I will talk about this round and how it looks different at kind of a growth stage. So Intercom kind of started from 2 places. One was from a technology place. Built this little bubble thing. It was cool. Put it in a JavaScript thing. That was cool. Gave it to customers. They thought it was cool. And then kind of added more to it over time. The bubble turned into a little dialog boxy thing. Then the dialog box turned into something you could like reply to. Then when someone replied to it, you needed an inbox. Then when you wanted to actually choose who you were going to send messages to, you kind of like needed some place to start. You needed a list, and the list happened. And then we let you add more data, and that was kind of like custom data. And then we added filters, and then with filters, it was segments. And, it kind of like just, one thing leads to another. And then you've got this thing called Intercom. So that was like the technology angle. And, I'll fight anyone who says that that's a bad way to build technology. True technologists, product people who are like just passionate about the potential to for technology in general. I don't care what you're passionate about. We're passionate about the internet and people who build businesses on the internet, and we wanted to make it better for people like us when we run an Exceptional and people like them to simply connect with their customers. So that was our passion. But the technology story is pretty straightforward, and anyone who's built a product, they know how kind of like it builds momentum. And if you're good product people, the momentum leads you in the right direction. The other side, the softer side, is that we got got to know this guy called Colin Harmon, who ran this coffee store at the time called 3FE, stands for Third Floor Espresso. The first incarnation was in his third floor apartment. The second was pretty much across the river from us in Dublin. We walked over there every day. I don't know how many people know anything about Ireland. You know 3FE, fantastic. You might also know that Dublin has shit coffee. Or at least it did back then. It's got better. He was the first to bring hipster coffee to Ireland. Good for Colin. So we went to get his coffee most days. Colin did nothing particularly special or magic, but what he did do was he was personal. Hey, Patrick, how's your day? Would you like a cappuccino again? Like, that was it. But you do that enough times and you've got a little bit of a rapport. You've got a relationship. You've got a relationship. There's some degree of loyalty that will form. The relationship had me sending more people to Colin. I would come back more often. I would give feedback, forgive mistakes. I probably paid more. It was really tangible and valuable to his business, the fact that we had a relationship. And he did that with a whole bunch of people. Again, sorry, Colin, but nothing particularly special or magical. But he was a human, and he got to be a human because he got to meet people face to face. If there was or is not value in people actually connecting, we wouldn't even be here today. Like, you know, we still struggle with the technologies that we have online to connect. But back then, the only technologies available were the shitty help desks, the tickets, the email marketing apps, marketing automation, CRMs, and live chat, and all this clunky stuff, none of which worked together. You didn't really know who you were talking to when you were using them. It was a total mess. And so, you know, the technology angle had us like building these things that we thought was cool. But looking at Colin, we were excited to build something that would help people better connect. And we knew that there was a human angle to that. And that's why we like stated from early on that our mission was to make internet business personal. So we kind of came at it from two angles, a pretty logical left brain approach and a soft, squishy right brain approach. And if you can mix those two things together well, you get special things. So that's kind of where we came from. We built this platform called Intercom. It was this big blob of features. It was cool, but it was a big blob of features. We built it for people like us. It was for people in our company. As we got bigger, we started to mature it so we could sell to people that were our size. As we got bigger, we got a little more complex. I say sophisticated with how we work. Teams formed. In the early days, anyone who's running a small company here, the product people do the support, and they do the sales, and they do the engineering. There's a lot more sharing. But as the company gets bigger, you form specific teams. And so we evolved the product to kind of map onto those teams. And so this big blob of a thing, a collection of features called Intercom, turned into 4 applications on top of this thing we call the Intercom platform. And the apps were simple apps that fit into these very simple use cases, supporting customers or talking to people on your website who might be prospective customers, making announcements, onboarding people, etc. But all working on this Intercom platform, which means they can share data and share workflows, etc., with the end goal and result being that everyone can be kind of on the same page about the customer and ultimately give them a far more human and personal experience. So that's like kind of where we came from and where we are today. The reason you raise a round like this, a $50 million round, it was led by Ilya Fushman, who ran product at Dropbox. Previously, he's now VC from Index Ventures. The reason you raise it kind of a round at this size is kind of like to maintain the momentum that you have started that's like working out so well. Like when you raise a seed round, and even when you raise a Series A round, never mind a Series B round, you're kind of like getting off the ground. You're kind of still saying like, will this work? I don't know if this will work. I hope this will work. You certainly tell the investors it will work, but really you're wondering if it will. And the initial capital is to like test that hypothesis. You know, there's like a couple of ideas like, I think it actually will be valuable if we can make this way for people to personally connect. I actually think it would be cool if you could talk to them within the app. There's a couple of little hypotheses, and that there's a big market out there for it, that we could kind of like attract them by doing some certain things, whether it's blogging or going to conferences or speaking at Startup Grind. You have a few assumptions, and the early kind of like money that you raise is like to test those assumptions. Later on, when it turns out that you were so wonderfully right and you really figured out the world, and congratulations to you, and you're very special and well done, then you're kind of like trying to just finance that momentum. You know, It's like, shit, it's working. We kind of can't stop now because it's working. But we're going to need a whole lot more money. And when you really build a momentum, when you go from 88 people to 250 people to 500 people and beyond, that gets super expensive. And for someone who, you know, in just 4 years went from like a 4-person company with no money to a $200 50-person company who just raised $50 million, it's like still shocking to me how much it costs. I won't say the numbers, but the money that leaves our bank account like every month is like holy fuck, like millions.
You know what I can
millions,
buy with all this?
Millions every month. So like just when you like build up this momentum, and it's not like anyone's sitting around. Like we specifically have a culture of like, you know, focus, and one of our values is every day counts. And you know, we get in early, we work hard, stay. You know, we don't mess around during the day. So it's not like we're like fucking around. Frankly, we're working really hard, but it still takes a lot of people, usually a lot of expensive people, to really maintain and build something that has momentum. Like it's very cheap to get one engineer to like hack together one table that returns a bunch of rows in a database. But when you're going to present that across tons of platforms to like you know, hundreds of millions of end users in the database in different parts of the world, on mobile, on a web, that is going to be not vulnerable to a bunch of different security exploits and so many other things that get super expensive. So that's kind of why you raise that like much bigger round. It's to continue the momentum that you've created when it's working.
Yeah, and when you were talking about blogging in your early days, sort of while you were still in Dublin, you hadn't come out necessarily to the Bay Area yet. You had, I think, a slightly different view of what valuations and all of the big raises and big rounds were. How did actually going through raising a big round and running a venture-backed company, how did that change your perspective of what those companies that maybe you were initially, you know, potentially cynical about? How did your sort of eyes completely change to what the purpose of VC is and what funding is like in the Valley?
Yeah, it's part of it is kind of closing your eyes and just jumping in the deep end and see if you don't drown. You know, I saw a bunch of people who were raising money, and they were smart people and shared values with us, and I was excited about what they were doing. So, you know, it wasn't all bad. That was the first thing I started to say to myself. But the other part of it was just like getting in there and trying something new. And we had bootstrapped a bunch of companies ourselves already. We had done it the other way. And we just wanted to try the Valley way, the VC-backed way. We just wanted to try a different way, frankly. That was all that it was. We simply wanted to try a different way. But the comfort came over time. Really, you can't really learn about anything until you like straight up experience it. There's like only so many core posts you can read by Jason Lemkin. Like, you have to just do it at some point. And the unfortunate thing is like, you know, the truth about anything, and in particular about venture capital and the way the Valley works, the truth is not spoken at a startup grind event, although I'm trying to be as honest as I possibly can. It's not in a core post or on Twitter or in podcasts. It's mostly in the heads of people who are way smarter to like really talk about, you know, the struggle and the pain and the mistakes that people make and the, you know, bad motivations that people have for doing some of these things. And so you really can't learn about these things without trying it, you know. I think what's important is like surrounding yourself with people who've done the thing that you want to do. And if it's raising money, getting out there to the Valley, like I said earlier about like Biz, for example, and the Twitter folks, one of the most magical things about Silicon Valley is that people are so generous with their time. They have this inert, I guess, understanding that it doesn't really work, or if something's wrong, by just being super selfish. You know what I mean? And I think also like humans want to grow and develop. It's babies want to copy their older siblings. They want to they want to grow. It's like very much a human thing, just growth and development and learning. It's just so human. And I think it's also human to teach, you know. I think you get a lot of value out of like teaching and helping. Like anyone who, unless you're some sort of sociopath, like you just get straight up value out of like learning and teaching. And so that's why people, I think, within any industry, but the only industry I know is the Valley, really. They just like love to teach. Like it's just such a magical place. People are so generous with their time. And so if raising a bunch of venture capital is the thing that you want to learn, put yourself amongst people who've done it, you know?
Yeah. Sweet. So you mentioned that along Intercom's product timeline, you developed 4 sort of core products within Intercom. Now, in the Valley, or some people will say that to make a really successful lean startup, you should focus on one thing and one thing only, and just kill it, nail it. What would you say to someone that might say, when you start adding features and adding product, do you lose anything in your ability to be the best at that one thing, whether it's customer feedback or lead or marketing automation? And if you believe that, how does Intercom done it differently to ensure that success? Because I know that the different products was part of the reason why you started it, but along that thesis of maintaining focus, how did you get to that point now and keep it sort of going? And then currently, I think you said that you're spending most of the recent raise that you got funded on R&D, not on marketing or spammy tactics, as you say. So, which you can do now, and you're a product-first company. But what are you spending that R&D on? Is it developing the products now? Is it where's Intercom going to be?
Yep. So focus comes in different forms. And you can focus on a mission and a vision, and that might require that, for example, you build many products. Right. The products that Intercom has built all pertain to helping businesses talk to their customers. They all reuse the same sets of technologies. They all use similar workflows. We sell to the same types of companies. It's not like one product has this market and one product has some other market. Right. They're still all internet businesses. So you can do many things and still be incredibly focused. And our focus is on helping internet businesses connect with their customers. At some point in time, if you want to do something really, really, really big, you have to expand your efforts alongside that ambition. And so it's true to say that, we're doing a lot. And one thing we've been really, really conscious of is to constantly scrutinize our processes, reinvent them. As you grow and you add so many different people to the organization, and so many different disciplines, and you're selling to so many different crazy larger amounts of customers, if not also bigger customers, you constantly need to just reorganize the company, reinvent these processes. And so for us to be able to build all these different products, we've had to build a bunch of different product teams. And for every product that we have a product manager and a designer and lead engineer and a bunch of engineers, and we have product marketing managers and a bunch of other folks who support each product. And then we have a team for each of the technologies that are shared amongst the products. And so even if we need to spin many plates to still focus on this one team, each of the plate spinners, you have a dedicated plate spinner, needs to only worry about their plate. So you need to be really, really thoughtful about what's the reason you might be focused and what are different ways to focus. In terms of what we're going to do today, to your point, we are spending a ton of money on R&D, and a company usually at our stage, we're 4 years in at some certain amount of revenue. If you look at other recently public companies who've shared kind of their data, when they're 4 years in and have the revenue that we have today, they typically spend around 30% of their revenue on new product development. About 30%. Consistently, you can see about 30%, give or take a little bit. Last year, we spent 85%, to your point. So, and you do find that with the new generation of technology company. The previous generation was pretty sales driven. The technology itself wasn't necessarily super different. If you look at a bunch of the categories that we compete against, say marketing automation, there's 4 to 8 plus solutions, but the winners are the people with the smartest and most aggressive sales teams, perhaps. Whereas in this new generation of software company, people who are defining categories like a Stripe or a Slack, and I hope Intercom, their very definition of that product category and their super strong, unique position in that is the primary thing that kind of drives growth, at least at the early days when you're in a market that's as big as the market for software is today. And so, over time, the percentage of revenue that we spend on new product development will definitely come down as we like try and reach more and more folks outside of the pool of early adopters. You're gonna have to spend more money on sales and marketing to reach them, to like get in front of them. Like they're not actively like hunting for products on sites called Product Hunt. Like that's not how most of the world works. But again, the market for software is so damn big such that you can have over 10,000 paying customers and there's still like a lot of early adopters. But what are we working on today? We're like still improving our current products. You know, any true product people I know, and I call us true product people, and so we're no exception. They're super hard on themselves. They have an incredibly high bar. If you want to benefit from the phenomenal growth that we have, primarily from building product, the product needs to be the best, or at least you need to fight for it to be the best. You know, one of the values that we do have is like we strive for perfection, and we hold an incredibly high bar. And so for all of our products, we're proud of them. People generally do love them. They're snapping them up in like their thousands per month, but we still look at them and we're like, we can do better. We can do better. We can do better. We will do better. We must do better. And so like that constant drive is the very thing that makes you special in the first place. And you can't continue that drive if you're not prepared to continue to invest in it. So that's mostly what we're doing. You know, continuing to invest in those products. We want our products to absolutely be the best in the industry, and we have high hopes and dreams for the way in which they can be technically very advanced, if not cool, but also very really and genuinely be the best way for internet businesses to connect in a personal and human way with their customers. But we are also building new products. We're also reinventing our technologies. We have a ton of like back-end infrastructure that we're constantly reinventing to make everything faster and smoother. But we have a couple of big things that we've been investing in aggressively. There's like a couple of dozen people who've been working on them for many months, and we'll announce a few things this year.
Awesome. How many people here are current Intercom customers? Sweet. So then I think this will be a great place for you to get some product feedback and product roadmap from your users. And with that, let's give it up for EOGHAN McCABE.